They called him Eric the Untouchable. Some called him cursed. Others said he was blessed, the man death couldn't catch. From the ashes of a burning ship to the edge of collapsing cliffs, Eric cheated death again and again. No one could explain it. Doctors couldn't. Scientists couldn't. Even priests called him the wandering miracle. This is not just a story of survival. It's a story of a man who defied every law of nature. A man who made even death himself wait in frustration. The first time death came for Eric, he was 22, a marine engineer aboard the Polaris, a cargo ship bound for Alaska. The night was cold, the sea rough, and the wind howled like wolves tearing through the dark. At 1:17 a.m., a massive explosion tore through the lower deck. Oil had leaked into the engine compartment, and in seconds, the ship became a floating furnace. Flames raced through the corridors, swallowing men before they could scream. The captain's radio call was drowned by the roar of fire, but Eric, burned coughing, nearly blind from smoke, dragged 3 crew members through the inferno. When the last lifeboat broke loose and drifted away, he leaped into the freezing ocean with his clothes on fire. Witnesses swore they saw a figure, half flame, half ice, clawing his way through the waves. When rescue teams arrived 7 hours later, they found Eric floating unconscious on a piece of debris. His skin blistered, his pulse faint, his body temperature near death. He should have died that night, but he didn't. They said it was hypothermia, adrenaline, luck. Eric just smiled weakly and whispered, "It wasn't my time." 6 years later, Eric was living in Phuket, Thailand, rebuilding his life as a diving instructor. He told friends he found peace under the sea, the one place that didn't burn. Then came December 26, 2003, the day the ocean turned against the world. The Indian Ocean tsunami struck without warning. A wall of water taller than palm trees slammed into the beach, crushing everything in its path. Eric was giving a dive lesson near Kata Beach when the waves rose like mountains. He grabbed 2 of his students and shouted for them to swim, but the sea swallowed them whole, underwater. He was thrown against coral, his oxygen tank ripped away. He felt his lungs filled with salt water, his vision dimming. And yet, something pulled him upward. When he regained consciousness, he was lying atop a capsized fishing boat, 20 miles from shore, his body covered in bruises, salt crusting his lips. Out of 37 people in his dive group, only 2 survived, Eric and a teenage girl who said, trembling, he wasn't swimming, he was walking on water. Eric never stayed in one place for too long. Maybe he was running from something, or maybe he knew death would always find him eventually. By 2009, he was working as a freelance photojournalist in Afghanistan, documenting life in war zones. His photos of burned villages and crying children went viral. But so did the danger. On June 8th, his convoy was ambushed by insurgents in the mountains of Kandahar. Bullets rained like metal rain. The Humvee ahead of him exploded. Eric dove into a ditch. His camera shattered beside him. A bullet pierced his shoulder. Another grazed his neck. He felt the heat of lead singe his skin. When soldiers reached him 30 minutes later, they thought he was gone. But he sat up slowly, blood pouring down his shirt, camera still clutched in his hand. Later, a surgeon pulled out 4 bullets lodged near his ribs and spine. None had hit a vital organ. The doctor muttered, "Impossible." Eric just laughed weakly. Death keeps missing. In 2012, Eric took up base jumping, the extreme sport of leaping off cliffs with only a parachute. Friends said he did it not for thrill, but to feel closer to fate. On July 29th, he jumped from the cliffs of Lauterbrunnen Valley, 1,000 feet of open air below him, but the wind shifted mid-flight. His parachute tangled. Cameras captured him spinning wildly, crashing into the rocky slope. Viewers online later said it looked like a body hitting the ground at terminal velocity. Rescuers found him 20 minutes later, barely breathing, bones shattered, blood pooling under him. And yet, when they loaded him into the helicopter, he was conscious. He even whispered to the medic, Tell death he'll have to climb higher than this. Eric spent 9 months in recovery. Doctors said he'd never walk again. But by the following year, he was hiking the Alps, limping, scarred, and smiling. 3 years later, Eric volunteered as a field medic during the Ebola outbreak in Sierra Leone. He wanted to document the epidemic, to show the world the faces behind the numbers. He worked deep inside the quarantine zones where most dared not go. One night, while helping a sick child, a needle accidentally pricked his hand through a torn glove. The next day, fever hit, then vomiting, then bleeding. He knew what it meant. He isolated himself in a tent, writing in his journal between fits of coughing blood. If this is the end, I hope death is proud of himself. He's earned it, but he didn't die. Weeks later, when his colleagues opened his tent expecting to find a corpse, they found Eric sitting upright, pale and weak, but alive. His body had somehow fought off one of the deadliest viruses on Earth. Blood tests later confirmed antibody scientists had never seen before. One doctor called it a biological miracle. Eric called it a second chance. By now, people were talking. Online forums called him the man who wouldn't die. Conspiracy theorists said he was a government experiment or an immortal. Some claimed he'd sold his soul. But those who met him said he was no superhuman. He was kind, quiet, haunted, his eyes pale blue and tired, carried the weight of 1,000 near-deaths. When a journalist once asked him what kept him going, he said simply, "Maybe death's chasing me because I'm running towards something he can't see." By 2017, strange things began happening. A man matching Eric's description was seen in India, standing calmly at the edge of a burning train wreck. In Chile, witnesses claimed a lone traveler pulled a boy from a bus before it plunged off a bridge, then disappeared. Everywhere disaster struck, someone swore they saw him, the white man who never died. But then he vanished. No trace, no passport record, no online presence. Until 2021, when an anonymous email landed in the inbox of an independent journalist. "You want the truth? I've died 5 times. The next 4 will test your faith in life itself." Attached was a grainy photo. A man standing on a snow-covered mountain peak, facing a storm. The journalist traced the IP address. It led to Greenland, because legends never die. They just hide between moments, waiting to be found again. "I've died 5 times, Eric once wrote. "The next 4 will test your faith." After surviving the Ebola outbreak, Eric disappeared from the world. No social media, no interviews, no trace. Until a year later, when a photograph surfaced from Moscow. It showed him at a press conference beside a controversial Russian whistleblower. Eric was now working with investigative journalists, exposing government corruption and hidden arms deals. But behind the camera, danger was closing in. His closest partner, Nadia, a young Russian journalist, grew strangely distant. He trusted her. She was brilliant, fearless, and kind. But trust, as Eric would learn, could be more deadly than bullets. One freezing night, they arranged to meet a source in an abandoned warehouse. Eric brought his camera. Nadia brought the car. When he stepped inside, the lights went out. Gunfire erupted. Men in masks surrounded him. Soldiers, silent and precise. Eric dug behind a crate, shouting Nadia's name. But when the headlights flashed, he saw her standing beside the shooters, watching. Her eyes met his for a split second, then she turned away. They dragged him out into the snow, beat him, and left him bleeding. But before the final shot, an explosion tore through the building. One of the men had dropped a grenade. Amid smoke and chaos, Eric crawled into the freezing river behind the warehouse. Hours later, police found only burning debris and 3 dead bodies. No sign of Eric. 3 weeks later, a CCTV camera captured him limping through a train station in Poland, face wrapped in bandages, eyes cold and distant. Betrayal had cut deeper than bullets, but he was alive. Again, I stopped trusting people after Moscow, he wrote later, but I still believe in fate. By 2018, Eric had moved to Nairobi, Kenya, working on a documentary about renewable energy in rural Africa. Locals said he was kind, always fixing solar panels, teaching kids how to build batteries from scrap. One afternoon, a violent thunderstorm rolled across the hills. The sky cracked open. Eric was helping repair a power line struck by lightning the night before. As he reached for a live wire, a blinding flash hit the metal pole beside him. 50,000 volts surged through his body. Witnesses said his body glowed blue before collapsing in the mud. He was dead for 7 minutes. Heart stopped, eyes open, no pulse. Then, as rescuers loaded his body onto a stretcher, he gasped violently and sat up screaming. His hands were charred, his shirt melted, but his eyes burned silver. Doctors called it a freak neurological event. Locals called it the storm's resurrection. For weeks, he could barely move, but one night he told a nurse, it wasn't lightning, it was a warning, death's getting closer. The nurse laughed nervously, but when she turned around, his hospital bed was empty. All that remained was a note on the window, written in his shaky handwriting. I'm not done yet. The world thought Eric was gone for good, but in early 2020, amid the chaos of global lockdowns, whispers spread through Istanbul. A foreign man had been arrested for espionage, accused of filming military sites near the border. No one knew his name, no fingerprints, no passport, but one photograph from inside the prison leaked online. It was Eric, thinner, beard overgrown, but unmistakably him. They kept him in cell 47, a concrete box with no window, only a flickering light and dripping pipe. For months, he was interrogated, beaten, left without food. Every other prisoner in that wing either broke or disappeared, but Eric endured. When asked why he wouldn't confess, he simply said, because I've survived worse than you. Then, one stormy night, a fire broke out in the lower cells. Guards evacuated the compound, but when they returned to cell 47, the door was open. Inside, they found nothing but a burnt chain, a set of footprints leading to the wall, and a hole in the ceiling's air vent. Eric had vanished. Interpol listed him as a fugitive. Turkish authorities swore he'd been smuggled out, but no one saw him again until a year later, when a fisherman off the coast of Iceland found a waterproof camera floating in the waves. Inside were video clips. One of them showed Eric, alive, sitting by a campfire in a snowy wilderness. He looked directly into the lens and whispered, "They can cage the body, not the will. Death's shadow is still following me, but I've learned how to walk faster." By 2023, Eric would have been 48 years old, but according to those who claimed to see him in Greenland, he looked no older than 35. He'd been living in isolation, building a small wooden hut near the Arctic Circle. Locals called him the Ghost Traveler. He bought no supplies, accepted no money, and spoke rarely. When asked why he came so far north, he said, "Time moves slower here. Maybe death can't find me in the cold." Then, in February, a massive blizzard hit the region, one of the worst in recorded history. For 3 days, winds howled at 150 kilometers per hour. His cabin was buried under snow. Rescue teams arrived after the storm cleared. What they found still baffles investigators. Inside the cabin was Eric's journal, the final page torn halfway through a sentence. "If you find this, tell the world." The chair was overturned. The fire was still burning, but there were no footprints, no body, no signs of struggle. Only one thing on the wooden table, a camera lens, cracked and frozen, the same model he'd used since his days in Afghanistan, and etched into the ice on the window, a message written by hand. You can't catch what was never running. Since that storm, no one has ever seen Eric again. Not his family, not his friends, not even the intelligence agencies that have been tracking him for years. But stories began to circulate online. Sightings of a man matching his description. A hiker pulling a child from an avalanche in Norway, that a stranger saving miners during a tunnel collapse in Chile, that a man caught on satellite footage walking alone across the Arctic ice. Always the same figure, always the same eyes, and always, just before disaster struck, he appeared. Some say he finally became what people always thought he was, a ghost. Others believe he found a way to slip between moments in time itself. His final email, sent to a journalist 2 months before the blizzard, read, "Every death I escaped took a piece of me. Maybe I wasn't meant to survive them all. But if you're hearing this, remember, death doesn't lose. It waits. Fire couldn't claim him. Water couldn't drown him. Bullets, gravity, disease, betrayal, even time, none could hold him. He walked through 9 deaths and disappeared into the wind. Some say he's still out there, the white man who defied death itself. Others say he's finally resting, somewhere beyond the reach of storms, bullets, and pain. But every year on the anniversary of the Greenland storm, explorers report strange flickers of light over the snow, flashes like camera shutters in the night. And in the distance, faintly carried by the wind, a voice whispering, "Not yet." 9 times he faced death. 9 times he rose. And when the world finally thought it had lost him, he became legend. This was the story of Eric, the white man, the legend of the man death couldn't catch. If you believe in miracles, share this story. If you believe in fate, comment your thoughts. And if you believe death can be cheated, subscribe. Because on 9 Life Stories, we don't just tell tales of survival. We tell the stories death tried to bury,